And we're on. Introducing John Cowgill, Jim Wilson from Costanoa VC.
Meet you.
How you doing, guys?
Thanks for having us.
Well, I know. I brought the weather with me. Sorry about that. Not ideal today.
You know, it does rain in California every once in a while.
Yeah. Was just saying.
Once a quarter.
He said that we've got snow in the UK right now, and John said that it's actually only snowed in SF like 3 or 4 times.
Correct. Last time was in the 70s, but it rains a lot. The weather in the city is less ideal than people from outside of these parts might appreciate.
Yeah, love it.
And in California, everyone kind of freaks out even when it rains. So for us, it's a big weather event.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I brought my coat. 'Cause like I say, I'm staying in Palm Springs at the moment, so it's quite a transition from being in shorts to then coming here with a coat and stuff. So
Welcome to California.
thank you very much. So yeah, thanks for coming on, guys. So look, with all of my guests, I like to sort of take it back to where it all began and who you are and how you got into the industry. So John, I'd like to start with you, sir, first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined Costanoa actually about 9 years ago. Starting my career in startups, doing sales and business development work, not specifically in cybersecurity, more broadly in just SaaS. Spent a couple of years in management consulting at a big firm and did the typical strategy and operations work, but really wanted to get back into startups and realized I didn't really know what to look for in early stage companies. I had a little bit of experience, but I wanted to join a great company. And serendipitously, I got introduced to my partner, Greg Sands, who founded the firm about 10 years ago. Really hit it off with him, and he was looking to make his first investment associate hire. So made a jump into VC with the pitch being, come hang out here for 2 years. You'll learn what a good startup looks like. Then you can go join one. And famous last words, because I'm still here 9 years later, but it's been an incredible run.
Yeah, you was recently promoted as well, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, congrats. That's brilliant. And then Jim, yourself.
I've been at Costanoa for 7 years and came up through kind of an operating role. I started out my career as in a sales organization at a company called Parametric Technology that has kind of graduated a lot of people in sales leadership roles over the years. I went on to work for a number of different startups. I did a stint overseas for about 8 years. My last role was running sales at Sumo Logic. And like John, I met Greg. Greg was actually on the board of a company where I ran sales, Merced Systems, with another person who had founded the company, Mark Selka, who's also at Costanoa, and came on board to kind of help our companies figure out their go-to-market strategy. I've since kind of focused on security and a couple of other spaces, but mostly I work with all of our founders and the sales organizations and pretty much any of their go-to-market group to help them kind of get lift and figure out market product fit early on, but also help them kind of build their first sales team, manage the sales team, make the sales team successful and efficient, and grow. And it's been, like John, it's been fun.
Yeah,
I like it.
How does your role differ from John's then specifically? So how closely do you two work together?
Well, first, we work together really well. I think that I give John a lot of credit. There's a lot of people in the venture space that don't appreciate and understand the dynamics of operating a company. And I think John, it breaks that mold. He understands it more than most, and he's constantly learning, which I think for founders, they love board members and investors that are like that. But the way we kind of think about division of roles is, John's superpower is figuring out what companies are in hot spaces, figuring out what are things that we want to invest in, and then evaluating the founder and the company and the idea to make an investment. I think my superpower is in taking that company and that idea and that early part of the product and figuring out how to help the founder get market product fit, get their first design partners, get sales off the ground, and ultimately grow the company.
Yeah.
Both of us are passionate about working not only with founders, but the whole executive team. We both love the concept of, how startups work and grow, but that's how we kind of separate things.
Yeah, nice. Okay, cool. Can you tell us more about the fund, John?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're an early stage fund. We focus on seed and Series A. So usually the first institutional capital coming in or the second institutional capital coming in. About 70% of our investments are actually made at formation. So shortly after founders get together, start the idea, maybe they've built a product, but often we're investing when it's 2 people and 12 PowerPoint slides. We lead with high conviction approach. So we lead rounds usually in the seed stage of about $2 to $5 million, writing a large check, if not the entire round, then the majority of the round. At Series A, we write checks in sort of the $8 to $12 million range. We have a bit under $2 billion under management. Our current fund is $275 million. And cybersecurity is one of our 4 core practice areas. So we spend a lot of time there collectively, and Jim and I lead up that practice and spend over half of our time in cybersecurity.
How many security companies are in the portfolio now?
12.
12 in total. Okay, cool. What I find interesting, if you're focusing on the early stage, particularly at that seed level, what is it you're looking for when you're like evaluating? Because typically there's not much for a product. Like, what is it you actually assess when you're making your investments?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it starts with the team. At the seed stage, so many things are going to change. The product might change, even the market that you're tackling might change, but the team isn't really going to change. So we spend a lot of time really trying to understand founders. What drives them? Do they have high velocity, grit, unique insight, ability to break through in whatever market that they're tackling? And a lot of that does come down to just interpersonal dynamics and appreciating, can this be someone who can build a breakout company? I can talk in a lot of detail about how we go about assessing founders, but that's the single most important thing, especially at seed stage, because as you said, there's only so much you can evaluate. I think after team, we do really want to understand the market that they're tackling, and is this an interesting market to go after? I think it's an interesting dynamic as a seed investor, because on one hand, you don't actually want to be investing in the thing that everybody's talking about. By the time everybody's talking about it, you're probably late as a seed stage investor. But you do want to be investing in markets that are starting to really break out and show potential for either disruption or category creation. In cyber specifically, we generally think about investments through the lens of, is this an existing category where there's a really clear reason why this is going to be disrupted? Or is this a new category and there's an opportunity for category creation? And what we usually look for is ideas that maybe this isn't a top 3 priority for a CISO yet, but it's likely going to become a top 3 priority in that 2 to 4 year horizon. That's the right timing for us to get involved with companies.
Okay, cool. What was your most recent security investment?
Well, the one that I think John and I are most interested in and that are incubating right now is probably Run Reveal.
Yep.
And
we have 2 in stealth that we can't.
Okay.
So Run Reveal is the most recent one we can tell you about. It was last year, but 2 that are not yet announced. So talk about Run Reveal.
But Run Reveal kind of encapsulates a little bit what John talked about. First, we love the idea of co-founders, so more than one, too. And Evan and Alan are just fantastic co-founders. They've worked together, they gel together, they get kind of one mind. I think that's great. And then the concept of Run Reveal is, like John said, it's an existing space, in this case, the SIM space, that it sucks. There's nobody that's had a breakout product and a breakout role, and yet every CISO we talk to needs it, wants it, thinks about it. So these guys have come up with what we think of simplistically as a modern SIM that's built from the ground up on a more modern architecture to solve things in a different way that traditional SIM products have. So we're working with them on their initial design partners. The initial traction has been great. They're building out the product. Every time John and I do a call with them, we get a product demo and we're more and more excited. And they're slowly building out their team.
Yeah, I love that. One of my clients I know is using those guys, and they speak extremely highly of them.
Yes.
Any others that you're prior to Run Reveal?
The investments that I think John and I see from a scale-up perspective that are doing quite well are App Omni and Cyberhaven. Those 2 companies are really hitting it right now in terms of scaling up. One of them is in a new category, cloud security posture management. The other one is disrupting an existing category, DLP. And both of them are doing well. And then I'm on the board of BugCrowd, and BugCrowd is a mature company in a space that, frankly, in a category that they created. And they're also expanding aggressively and going into new markets.
Nice. Okay, cool. John, you mentioned last week that you had your company off-site. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the trends and themes that you were talking about, particularly on the cyber side?
Yeah. So cyber is an incredibly active market right now. And at a time when you see so many executive functions seeing their budgets cut, CISO budgets are still growing. If you look at the public markets, some of the richest valuations are in cyber companies. Despite that, it's really noisy, incredibly competitive, difficult to break through. We invest across categories, and I think we would say breaking through to the CISO and selling to the CISO is one of the hardest challenges in enterprise sales. So one of the things that we're really looking for is what are the product categories where there's appetite and desire for new solutions. While it's incredibly hyped, we believe there's a lot of things to be excited about at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity, for really two reasons. One, the bad guys have new weapons. Attackers are leveraging AI to launch, incredibly sophisticated deepfake attacks. They're launching attacks at a different level of scale. They're using AI to identify vulnerabilities. Frankly, there's a lot of research that shows that while AI is accelerating developer productivity and velocity, it's also introducing a lot more vulnerabilities into code bases. So on the problem side, the problems are arguably getting worse with AI. But on the solution side, if you look at the jobs to be done in cybersecurity, so many of them are labor intensive. And people talk about all the time the labor shortage in cybersecurity and the 10 million unfilled cybersecurity roles, as I'm sure you know well. And a lot of those jobs are actually really well suited for the types of problems that AI can solve. Processing unstructured data, coordination across multiple different systems. And so two of the investments, investments I mentioned in Stealth that we've made this year sit at that intersection of AI and cybersecurity. So we're really excited about that opportunity. I will say there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of noise, and I would say even a lot of snake oil that's being sold right now. Maybe the last trend I'll note is I think a lot of consolidation is happening in cybersecurity. There's definitely a pendulum that swings back and forth in cybersecurity between point products and suites. And I think over the 2019 to 2022 horizon, when there was lots of capital flowing, you saw just a proliferation of point products in cyber that were, built for purpose, solved a really good problem. But as a result, if you talk to a CISO, they will tell you they're often dealing with 50 to 100 different cyber products. And that creates its own form of pain. They all have their own data hierarchy, and integration is challenging. So what we hear from CISOs is, despite there's all of these new problems and they're growing budgets, they'd actually like to consolidate a little bit and have fewer vendors. So one of the themes that we're seeing in our portfolio is how do we either become a suite and build out into adjacent categories or buy into adjacent categories, or are there opportunities that are exciting to actually join a larger suite? And I think the cybersecurity M&A has been incredibly active. I mean, even this morning you saw Wiz announced its acquisition of Daz. We think there's going to be a lot more of that. And so we're trying to figure out the right way to play that with our portfolio, where there's either the opportunity to build a suite or to join a suite in a way that could be exciting for everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. Over the last 9 years that you've been as an investor, obviously you must have seen a lot of pitch decks. What are some of the common sort of mistakes that you see founders make when they're trying to pitch their product to you at the real early stage? Is there any advice that you would give to founders?
Yeah, well, I'll say specifically to cyber, I think it's often tempting to sort of play acronym soup, right? Like, this is the category we fit into, and here are the 5, buzzwords and acronyms. And I generally really want to just start with, what is the problem that you're solving, and really show me the product, show me what's unique about it. I like it when people get more tactical and get kind of less high-level hand-wavy with their pitch. I'd say that's probably the single most common thing in cyber that I find a bit of a turnoff, is when it's all hand-waving and acronyms and not just really tactical. Here's the hair-on-fire problem for the CISO, and here's how we solve it better than anyone else. So that would be my first, major point. I think the second thing is what I really like to do when we're diligencing a company is actually put founders in front of CISOs or in front of a security operations center or whoever their buyer is that they're targeting. Because that really gives me a signal on their ability to empathize and their ability to sell. And it's often surprising, people that have on paper great backgrounds that really can't connect with the buyer, and then people that you would say are non-obvious founders where they have really natural rapport and natural understanding. So I think the second thing I would just say is really understand, who are you selling to, and what do they care about. And I think one of the things I always love to hear when someone's pitching is, we've talked to 60 people about this idea, or 100 people about this idea, and here's what we're hearing. Here are the key themes. Here's what keeps coming up. I think if I don't hear that, I often ask people, like, how many people have you talked to about this? And a fuzzy answer there is usually a bad sign for me. The last thing I'll note is back to the team. I really like to see, we've invested in sole founders, and there are legendary companies that have been built by sole founders, but I probably have a slight bias towards co-founders. And what I'd say is, I really want to understand, have you worked together before? Do you really understand kind of division of how you plan to work together? How do you disagree? How do you resolve disagreements? And in that first meeting, I'm really trying to understand the co-founding dynamic, because One of the single biggest reasons startups struggle or fail is co-founder disagreements or tensions. If you're a solo founder, I think I'm looking for sort of a high degree of self-awareness of how you plan to build out an extraordinary team around you. What are your superpowers, but what are the areas you're going to need to augment? Because you can't do it all, and nobody's capable of running a business all by themselves.
Yeah, very true.
I just want to emphasize one point that John made on the number 2 around the crispness of founders and their ability to sell. It's not even investing that's going to help them if they can do that. It's growing the company. 2 examples in our portfolio of founders that I was super impressed with when we invested, and I've been impressed with them since. They're still early stage, but Scott Kriz, the CEO over at Signal, SGNL, is just fantastic in front of customers, right? And Joni Klippert at Stackhawk came up through the product organization, so just knows how to understand customers. And that's the whole concept. We talk about founder sales all the time, but founders' ability to have conversations early on with their early customers and understand their pain points, talk about their product in a way that makes sense and is captivating, and then frankly move it through the sales cycle to get them to be paying customers and give feedback as customers is critical. And those 2 founders in particular, they're really great as early stage founders in our portfolio.
Yeah. At what point do you actually come in, Jim? Are you there from the pitch and sort of sat in at that point?
It's a great question. I tell John, I joke about this. I like to come in as early as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, because one of the fallacies that founders, and I think we as an industry, sales industry, don't help, that everybody talks about closing a deal and closing a sale. There's all these heroics around that, but nobody talks about discovery and qualification, which is really the early part of sales, and is, in my opinion, the more critical part for an early stage company to figure out. So I like to come in early and ask the founders, like, okay, here's what your product does, but what are the problems you're solving? To John's point, it's not just about explaining that to an investor, but now how are you going to explain it to a CISO or a buyer? Who are you selling to? And when I think of who are you selling to, it's ICP companies that would have that problem, but it's buyer personas. What buyer is it? Yes, we talk about CISOs all the time, but a lot of our portfolio companies don't sell to CISOs, and in many places, the CISO is the wrong person to sell to. It's the data security engineer, or it's somebody else in the organization. And helping founders figure that out, think about it, experiment, and then figure out how to have those conversations so that they get as much out of the initial conversations as the customer prospect, and can say definitively, like, oh, this is a great prospect for us. Here's the problem. We solve it well. Or no, this really isn't a great prospect, and we should continue to have the conversations or drop it and move on to somebody else. So that discovery and qualification is something I like to work on as early as possible.
Yeah, for sure. When do you start advising that a founder should move away from that founder-led sales and think about bringing in a sales rep?
If I have an opinion on this, which is I like to see founders do that as long as possible. In fact, I think maybe one of the signals I look for after we've invested in a kind of a company's growth is this is the red flag, is I look for the founder that wants to get rid of the sales function and the whole concept of talking to customers as early as possible. The reality is most of the best founders out there, they did the first 5 to 10 deals. They built the sales ideas and the concepts so that when they go to hire their first head of sales or their first sales rep, they can sit down with this person and say, here's what I've learned. Here's the initial understanding of a sales playbook. So I think of founders as getting to, if you want a marker, like 10 customers. But more importantly, what I always ask the founders is, do you feel like you have enough of a repeatable sale that if you brought somebody in, you can sit them down and say, here's how I think a typical sale works in this process, from discovery and qualification through to validation, through to closing. Once they can say that and it's logical and it makes sense, then they're ready to start hiring their first people and build out a sales function.
What do you think about the DNA of the first sales rep as well? Because it's obviously a very different DNA to the growth stage. What have you
Very much. I should ask you that question. You interview them all the time.
I hear it.
No. Look, I think the first thing, this is more for people that want to get into early stage, because I hear a lot of this from my network, which is, I want to take the next step in my career. I want to go be the first head of sales at an early stage company. First thing I think is you have to be a believer in the company you're with. Especially in the security space, people can sniff out salesperson that doesn't really believe in the product and isn't passionate about it. So you have to really be a believer. The way I think of it as the litmus test is if you're interviewing in a company and you would invest your own money in the company in addition to working there, that's a good sign. If you wouldn't invest your own money and you have some concerns, maybe not a good place to work. Second thing, though, is really critical, and again, not talked a lot, is intellectual curiosity. So you have to have people that are okay having early stage discovery conversations and just really learning and about what the buyer personas and the companies they're selling to, what the problems they have are. Mm-hmm. So I think intellectual curiosity. And then the third is it's got to be someone that wants experimentation. Look, there are some fantastic sales reps that can do paint by numbers, and you take steps 1 through 10, and they can drive a Mack truck through that and build a sales organization and refine that process. But those aren't the best people for early stage. The early stage sales executives, sales leaders are experimenters. They like to rapidly experiment, learn from it, and then try new experiments until they get the repeatable sales process right.
Yeah. Any of your current portfolio companies done it particularly well?
Boy, good question. Yeah, I think we have a lot. I mean, I think that, some of the early people at BugCrowd did really well. One of the first sales people there went on to found another company, actually. I think App Omni's Brandon Connolly, who started there with Brendan O'Connor, still there, did a great job early on, continuing to grow the company. And even outside of our portfolio, I can think of a number of the head of the sales that do well.
Yeah,
I think they all do share the similar characteristic, though, that they're all intellectually curious, they like to experiment, and they're really good at the early part of the sales process, discovering qualification, and taking that and working with the founders and the product teams to figure out what is the repeatable process that works, and then figure out how more to build the product.
Yeah, brilliant. John, back to you. I think, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but looking into the future and the space, what do you think I'm assuming it's just going to be a lot more AI.
Well, I think AI is a primitive, right? That's going to get applied to a lot of different categories. And we're really excited about that opportunity. A few areas we're excited about. Vulnerability management. I think that's an area where there's going to be a big opportunity for category refresh over the coming years. The reason is that vulnerability management is a machine scale problem now. The number of CVEs getting published continues to grow. The number of vulnerabilities in code bases continues to grow as the size of code bases continues to grow at a rapid rate. And that's a space where, you've got some good products, but the products that are the incumbent products are all 15-plus-year-old companies. I think there's going to be an opportunity to disrupt vulnerability management with AI because, again, it's a machine scale problem that's going to require new approaches. We're really excited about the opportunity in data security right now, and our bet is Cyberhaven. I think data security is another category where people are really looking at legacy products and saying these products don't work at all. And another case where there's just going to be an explosion in unstructured data being generated by AI copilots. That data that is being generated will need to be secured with tools that can actually process and understand it. And legacy data loss prevention products, or even more modern approaches like DSPM, really are built around a structured data paradigm. So I think there's a huge opportunity in data security right now. The last one I'll mention is actually SaaS security, another one where we think there's growing awareness that these underlying systems of record that power modern businesses, Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, G Suite, Box, they hold all the sensitive data, and people think about those products as being secure by default. They're really not. They're very easy to misconfigure and expose sensitive data. So there's a category that has been emerging now for a handful of years. You saw obviously a massive SaaS security breach earlier this year with Snowflake. We think that's just the beginning. Yeah, exactly. Right. Just a small one. We think that's just the beginning. So those are a few specific categories where we see kind of a lot of growth and potential. And I think every SaaS security, or actually every security company, kind of goes through its hype cycle where you have innovation trigger, a peak of inflated expectations, the trough of disillusionment. I think all three of those are still kind of rising in terms of awareness. And so we're excited to be investors in all three categories.
Yeah, brilliant. And Jim, what's the future for you in Costanoa then, mate?
Oh, man. Look, this is a really fun job. Like we get to wake up every morning and work with founders that are trying to solve problems, change the world. They're passionate about it. we get to work on different problems every day. So I think the future for Costanoa is to continue to grow in this space. John and I talk about this quite a bit, but cyber is a reputational space for venture investors. And Costanoa has worked really hard over the years with our portfolio companies. And frankly, with the success of our portfolio companies, I think we've developed a really good reputation in the cyberspace. We are actually helpful. We invest, but we're helpful. We have a great network within security. We run an advisor program that's fantastic, where the CISOs get as much out of it as they put into it. Again, as I mentioned, we ride on the coattails of companies like BugCrowd and CyberHaven and AppOmni and StackHawk and Signal that are all just doing great and growing. And I think that, I'm biased, but I think John and I are good to work with. We're fun to work with. And at the end of the day, I think founders do have to raise money. They need to get people on their boards, but they want to wake up every morning and work with people that are in it with them, shoulder to shoulder, solving problems and doing it in a fun way. I like to think that we're the type of people that our founders would work hard on a problem with us, and then they'd go grab a coffee with us or a beer or whatever they want to do in the evening with us as well.
Brilliant. Chaps, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like and share with your friends and colleagues, as this is really important for the show's reach. If you'd like to be our next guest or are interested in Aspiron Search's staffing solutions, please get in touch directly with me or reach out to us via our website, www.aspironsearch.com.